Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet Liam Parker, a successful CEO with a life that seemed perfect on the outside. But deep down, Liam was struggling. He had everything a man could want: wealth, status, a beautiful home. Yet he still felt an emptiness inside. The loneliness gnawed at him, especially when he looked at his daughter, Ella. She was the light of his life, but she had her own struggles, and he often felt overwhelmed by the pressure of being both a dad and a CEO. It was on one of these particularly stressful days when things took an unexpected turn. Liam had just received an urgent call from his regular babysitter, who canceled last minute due to a family emergency. He had an important meeting coming up and had no time to arrange for another sitter. Desperate, he made a quick call, trying to reach anyone, who could help. That's when he accidentally called the wrong number. The woman on the other end of the line sounded kind, a bit hesitant, but willing to help. She agreed to come over and look after Ella for a few hours. Little did Liam know, this was about to change everything. When she arrived at his doorstep, Liam was taken aback. She was nothing like the sitters he'd had before. She wasn't dressed in the usual formal attire he expected. Instead, she was wearing a simple, practical uniform, and there was a warmth in her smile that immediately put him at ease. But, as she introduced herself as Sarah, something felt different. The way she spoke, the way she looked at him with kindness, it was like she wasn't just here for a job. For the first time in a long while, Liam felt a connection, something beyond the business meetings and boardroom negotiations. As Sarah began talking with Ella, his daughter immediately warmed to her. She was laughing, playing, and in that moment, Liam realized how much he had been missing, not just in his own life, but in Ella's as well. He watched her interact with his daughter, and for the first time, Liam didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He felt like maybe, just maybe, this woman could be the missing piece he hadn't even known he was looking for. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet Liam Parker, a successful CEO with a life that seemed perfect on the outside. But deep down, Liam was struggling. He had everything a man could want: wealth, status, a beautiful home. But there was still an emptiness inside. The loneliness gnawed at him, especially when he looked at his daughter, Ella. She was the light of his life, but she had her own struggles, and he often felt overwhelmed by the pressure of being both a dad and a CEO. It was on one of these particularly stressful days when things took an unexpected turn. Liam had just received an urgent call from his regular babysitter, who canceled last minute due to a family emergency. He had an important meeting coming up and no time to arrange for another sitter. Desperate, he made a quick call, trying to reach anyone, who could help. That's when he accidentally called the wrong number. The woman on the other end of the line sounded kind, a bit hesitant, but willing to help. She agreed to come over and look after Ella for a few hours. Little did Liam know, this was about to change everything. When she arrived at his doorstep, Liam was taken aback. She was nothing like the sitters he'd had before. She wasn't dressed in the usual formal attire he expected. Instead, she was wearing a simple, practical uniform, and there was a warmth in her smile that immediately put him at ease. But, as she introduced herself as Sarah, something felt different. The way she spoke, the way she looked at him with kindness, it was like she wasn't just here for a job. For the first time in a long while, Liam felt a connection, something beyond the business meetings and boardroom negotiations. As Sarah began talking with Ella, his daughter immediately warmed to her. She was laughing, playing, and in that moment, Liam realized how much he had been missing, not just in his own life, but in Ella's as well. He watched her interact with his daughter, and for the first time, Liam didn't feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He felt like maybe, just maybe, this woman could be the missing piece he hadn't even known he was looking for. As Sarah continued to look after Ella, Liam couldn't help but watch from a distance. He had never seen his daughter so at ease with someone she had just met. There was something about Sarah, something genuine in her eyes, the way she interacted with Ella that made Liam feel both grateful and uneasy at the same time. He was grateful for the help, but uneasy because he had always been so careful about who he trusted with his daughter. The thought that he had invited a stranger into his home on a whim made him second-guess himself. But as he watched Sarah and Ella playing, those doubts began to fade. Ella was laughing, something she hadn't done in a while. The sound was like music to Liam's ears, and he found himself feeling a warmth in his chest, something he hadn't realized he had been missing. Sarah wasn't just a babysitter. She was more like a breath of fresh air in his otherwise sterile and lonely life. As the hours passed, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was somehow different from all the others who had come and gone. He felt an odd connection to her, one he couldn't explain. After a while, Liam found himself leaning against the doorframe, watching Sarah with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She was gently brushing Ella's hair as they sat on the couch, chatting about school and the things they both loved. There was something so natural about it, like they had known each other for years. For the first time in what felt like forever, Liam allowed himself to relax. He didn't have to worry about business meetings or investor calls. He could just breathe and enjoy the moment. At some point, Sarah glanced up and noticed Liam standing there. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, neither of them said anything. But in that silence, there was an understanding. It was as though, in that single glance, they both knew that something had shifted. Liam cleared his throat and pushed himself off the doorframe. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little rougher than he intended. Sarah smiled softly. "No problem. Ella's great company." Liam smiled, but it was a little strained. He couldn't help but feel like he was somehow intruding on something he wasn't supposed to be a part of. He was a CEO, a man who had always been in control. But now, in this moment, he was standing there feeling vulnerable, like a man who had lost his way. Sarah must have sensed it because she softened her smile. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." There was something so genuine in her voice that it made Liam feel both comforted and unnerved. He didn't know what it was about her, but he wanted to know more. They spent the next hour talking about their lives, or rather, Liam talking and Sarah listening. Liam was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. He found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone else in years. He told her about the pressure of being a single dad, about the sacrifices he had made to build his empire, and how, despite all the success, he still felt alone. Sarah listened intently, offering small words of encouragement here and there. "It sounds like you're doing your best for her," Sarah said softly, after Liam finished talking about his struggles with balancing work and parenting. "I'm sure Ella knows that." Liam sighed, a little surprised at how much weight had lifted off his shoulders just from talking to her. "I don't know. I just feel like I'm always one step behind." Sarah smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "We all do sometimes, but you're doing better than you think." Liam didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood there for a moment, thinking about her words. It was strange how much he felt like he could trust her, even though he had only just met her, as if she had some kind of wisdom that he had been missing in his life. He shook his head slightly, trying to push the thoughts away. He needed to focus on what was important, and right now, that was Ella. He had to be strong for her. He had to be the father she deserved. But as he watched Sarah again, a small seed of something else began to grow inside him. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was something more. Either way, he couldn't deny the connection he was starting to feel. It was still early, and he didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something told him this wasn't just a one-time thing. Something had changed in him, and in his home, and he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. It had been a long time since he'd allowed himself to feel this way about anyone, and he wasn't sure what to do with it. But for now, he decided to let the night unfold. They were both in this moment together, and that was enough. Sarah's soft laugh brought him out of his thoughts. He smiled at her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe things could be different. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. Days passed, and Liam found himself thinking about Sarah more than he expected. He couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but every time he thought about their conversation, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't just about Ella anymore. There was a connection between him and Sarah, something real, something he hadn't felt in years. Sarah, on the other hand, had left an impression on him. She wasn't just a babysitter to him anymore. She was someone who understood the pressures he faced as a father, someone who listened without judgment. It wasn't long before he found himself reaching out to her again, this time not just as a favor, but because he genuinely wanted to see her. The next weekend, he invited her to join him for dinner at a local restaurant, a place he didn't usually go to, but somehow felt it was the right place for a first, casual evening with her. When Sarah walked into the restaurant, he was taken aback by how effortlessly beautiful she looked. She wasn't dressed in anything extravagant, but her presence filled the room with a quiet grace. It was in that moment that Liam realized how much he was starting to admire her. They spent the evening talking, getting to know each other on a deeper level. Sarah shared her story with him, how she had been on her own since she was a teenager, learning to be independent and self-sufficient. She had worked hard for everything she had, and yet, she was humble in a way that made Liam respect her even more. As the night went on, Liam found himself sharing things with her that he hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. He talked about his fears as a single father, the pressure to maintain his empire, and how, despite all the wealth, he sometimes felt empty. Sarah listened, her eyes never leaving his, her words kind and comforting. "You're not alone in this, Liam," she said softly. "Sometimes it just takes a little bit of help from the right person." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent so much of his life trying to do everything on his own, trying to appear invincible, but in that moment, he realized how much he had been missing. The evening ended with a quiet walk outside, the city lights casting a soft glow around them. As they said their goodbyes, Liam couldn't help but feel a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. It was strange. He wasn't sure if it was the dinner, the conversation, or just Sarah's presence, but he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened. Liam continued to rely on Sarah for help with Ella, and each time she came over, he found himself looking forward to her presence more and more. They began to spend time outside of the house too, going for walks in the park, grabbing coffee, talking about their hopes and dreams for the future. There was a comfort in her company that Liam couldn't deny, a feeling of being understood, of being seen for who he really was, not just the CEO or the single father. One evening, after a particularly stressful week at work, Liam invited Sarah over for a quiet dinner. It was just the two of them, no distractions, no agendas. They sat together, sharing a meal, and for the first time in a long while, Liam felt completely at ease. There was no pretense, no need to perform. It was just two people connecting on a human level. After dinner, they sat on the couch, talking about life, about what truly mattered. Sarah had her own dreams, things she wanted to accomplish in life, and she shared them with Liam. She wanted to start a non-profit organization to help at-risk youth, to give them the opportunities she had never had. Her passion for helping others was contagious, and as Liam listened, he found himself inspired by her. "You know," he said, "you're going to make a difference in this world. I can see it." Sarah smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Liam's heart skip a beat. "I hope so," she said quietly. "But it's not about the grand gestures. It's about the little things we do every day that add up to something bigger." Liam looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he realized just how much she had changed his perspective on life. It wasn't about the money, the fame, or the success anymore. It was about the connections, the people who cared, and the moments that made everything else fade away. That night, as Sarah left his house, Liam stood in the doorway, watching her walk down the driveway, and he felt something stir inside him, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. He wasn't sure where this was going, but for the first time, he felt like maybe he didn't have to do it all alone. Maybe, just maybe, Sarah was the missing piece he never knew he needed. As the weeks went by, Liam found himself growing more and more comfortable around Sarah. The bond they had formed over the past few weeks wasn't just a fleeting connection. It felt real, solid. Every time she came over, it was like the walls he had built around his heart were slowly crumbling. He found himself looking forward to their time together, not just because she was helping with Ella, but because she made him feel seen, heard, and understood in a way no one else had in years. They continued to spend time together outside of their usual babysitting routine, going on walks, grabbing coffee, and talking about everything and nothing at all. It wasn't long before Liam realized just how much he cared for her. One evening, after a long day at work, Liam found himself sitting alone in his office, looking out at the city skyline. The weight of his responsibilities as a CEO was heavier than usual, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had everything he had ever dreamed of: success, wealth, a beautiful home, but it felt empty without someone to share it with. His thoughts drifted to Sarah, as they often did lately. He had never imagined that a simple babysitter could change his life in such a profound way. He picked up his phone, hesitated for a moment, and then sent her a message. "Do you want to meet up tonight? Just the two of us. No work, no distractions. I'd really like to spend some time with you." He hit send and immediately felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed with a reply. "I'd love that. I'll be there in an hour." Liam smiled to himself, feeling a flutter in his chest. An hour later, Sarah arrived, looking as effortlessly beautiful as always. They spent the evening talking about their lives, their dreams, and their pasts. It felt like they were on the same wavelength, like they truly understood each other in a way no one else could. As the night wore on, Liam found himself sharing things with Sarah that he had never told anyone. He talked about the pressure of being a CEO, the loneliness that came with it, and the constant fear that he wasn't enough for Ella. Sarah listened intently, her eyes filled with empathy. "You're doing the best you can, Liam," she said softly. "You don't have to be perfect. You're enough just as you are." Her words were like a balm to his weary soul, and for the first time in a long while, Liam allowed himself to believe them. He realized that he had been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders for so long, afraid to ask for help, afraid to let anyone in. But Sarah was different. She didn't judge him, didn't see him as just a CEO or a father. She saw him as a person. And in that moment, he knew that he wanted more than just her help with Ella. He wanted her in his life, in a way that went beyond their current arrangement. As the night came to an end, Liam walked Sarah to the door, feeling a sense of unease in his chest. He didn't want the night to end, but he wasn't sure how to ask her for more. "Sarah," he said, his voice tentative, I really enjoy spending time with you. I want to get to know you better, not just as someone who helps me with Ella, but as someone I can share my life with." Sarah looked at him, her eyes soft and understanding. "I enjoy spending time with you too, Liam," she said gently. "But I think you need to take things slow. You've been through a lot, and so have I. Let's just take it one step at a time." Liam nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He wasn't expecting everything to change overnight, but hearing her words gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something meaningful together. Over the next few days, their relationship continued to evolve. They spent more time together, and with each passing day, Liam found himself falling for Sarah in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was beginning to see the world differently, through her eyes, through the lens of someone who valued kindness, honesty, and connection over everything else. He realized that he didn't need to have all the answers, that he didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present, to let go of the fear that had been holding him back. One evening, as they sat on the couch, talking about their favorite books and movies, Sarah looked at Liam with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Liam," she said, "I think you're ready for more. You're not just a CEO or a father. You're a person who deserves to be happy, to be loved. And I think you're starting to see that." Liam looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "I think you're right," he said, feeling a warmth spread through him. "And maybe, just maybe, I'm ready to let go of the past and embrace what's ahead." As Sarah smiled at him, Liam realized that everything had changed. His heart was no longer guarded, no longer afraid of what might happen. He had found something real, something worth fighting for, and for the first time in a long while, he felt truly alive. As the days went by, Liam and Sarah continued to grow closer. There was a subtle shift in their dynamic, something neither of them could fully explain, but it was there. Every time Sarah walked into his home, there was a sense of warmth that filled the space. It wasn't just about the help she provided with Ella anymore. It was about the way she made him feel, seen, understood, and, for the first time in years, hopeful. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult meeting at work, Liam found himself sitting on the balcony of his penthouse, looking out at the city below. The skyline stretched out before him, a sea of glass and steel, and yet, it felt so distant. He had everything anyone could ever want: wealth, success, a beautiful home, but it was never enough. The emptiness was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. That was, until Sarah entered his life. He thought about her constantly, how her smile made him forget about the stresses of his day, how her laugh brought light into his life in a way he hadn't experienced before. He never expected this kind of connection, and yet, here it was. He felt like he was finally starting to let go of the walls he had built around himself, walls that had kept him distant from everyone, even his own daughter. Ella had become so attached to Sarah, and it was easy to see why. Sarah had a way of making people feel special, of making them feel valued, something that Liam knew his daughter needed, but also something he desperately needed himself. One evening, as Liam was finishing up his work for the day, Sarah sent him a message. "How about we take Ella out for dinner tonight? I know a great little spot by the park. Just the three of us." Liam felt a surge of happiness at the thought. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was about the fact that Sarah wanted to spend time with him, with them, as a family. He quickly replied, "I'd love that. I'll be ready in an hour." When they arrived at the restaurant, it felt different from the usual business dinners Liam was accustomed to. It wasn't about impressing anyone, or making deals, or talking numbers. It was about connection. The three of them sat together, laughing, talking, and enjoying each other's company in a way that Liam hadn't thought was possible for him. As the night went on, he found himself opening up in a way he never had before. He talked about his childhood, about the sacrifices his parents had made for him, about how he had always felt like he had to prove himself. Sarah listened intently, offering words of encouragement when he needed them. There was no judgment, no expectation, just a shared understanding between the two of them. As they finished their meal, Sarah looked at Liam with a soft smile. "I think we're making a good team," she said quietly. Liam nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I agree," he replied, his voice a little rough with emotion. "I never expected to find someone like you." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand, her touch gentle but reassuring. "I think the unexpected is often the best part of life," she said, her voice full of sincerity. Liam looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: peace. The next morning, as he was getting ready for work, Liam's phone rang. It was his assistant, Claire, with the usual updates. But this time, Liam wasn't listening the way he usually did. His thoughts were elsewhere, on the conversation he'd had with Sarah the night before, on the way she had made him feel. It was as though, in that one dinner, everything had shifted. He didn't feel like he was just a CEO anymore, or a father trying to balance it all. He felt like a man, someone who was allowed to have emotions, to have relationships, to let someone in. That evening, as Liam stood in front of his office building, looking up at the towering glass structure, he realized that he was no longer defined by his wealth, by his position, or by his responsibilities. He was defined by the connections he made, by the people he let into his life. And in that moment, he knew that he wanted Sarah to be one of those people. The following week, he invited her to meet him for lunch at a quiet cafe near his office. When she arrived, Liam was already waiting for her, a little nervous but excited at the same time. They sat down together, and for the first time, Liam didn't feel the need to hide behind his professional persona. He could just be himself with her. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but sincere, "I've been thinking about us, about everything that's happened between us. And I just want you to know that I'm ready to take the next step, whatever that may be." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of uncertainty, but all she saw was sincerity. She smiled softly and reached for his hand. "I'm ready too, Liam," she said. "Let's see where this journey takes us." And just like that, Liam knew that his life was about to change forever. He wasn't just a CEO or a single father anymore. He was a man who was ready to open his heart, to embrace the love and connection he had been missing for so long. And with Sarah by his side, he knew that they could face whatever the future had in store. As the days passed, Liam and Sarah's relationship blossomed in ways neither of them had anticipated. What started as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something deeper, more meaningful, something that neither of them had expected to find. Liam found himself looking forward to their time together, not just because Sarah was there to help with Ella, but because she had become someone he could rely on emotionally, someone who brought balance to his chaotic life. They spent more time together, not just on weekends, but on quiet evenings after work. They would talk about everything: work, dreams, the things that made them who they were. And in these moments, Liam realized just how much he had been missing. The company of someone who wasn't there because of his wealth or status, but because she genuinely cared. Sarah had become a grounding force in his life, someone who made him feel human again. It wasn't just about their growing connection. It was about the way Sarah made him feel, alive, vulnerable, and yet safe. For the first time in a long time, Liam didn't feel the pressure of being perfect or being in control. He felt like he could be himself around her, flaws and all, and she accepted him without hesitation. A few weeks later, Liam invited Sarah to a small charity gala he was attending for work. It wasn't the kind of event he usually enjoyed, filled with business partners and corporate sponsors, but it was important for the company, and he knew that his presence there was expected. He asked Sarah if she would accompany him, unsure of what she would say. To his surprise, she agreed, and as the evening drew closer, Liam realized he was looking forward to it more than he had expected. The night of the gala, Sarah arrived looking stunning in a simple but elegant dress. It was nothing extravagant, yet she radiated a quiet confidence that made Liam's heart skip a beat. As they entered the ballroom together, Liam noticed the way people turned their heads, the way they looked at Sarah with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She wasn't from their world, and yet, she stood out more than any of the polished socialites he'd seen in the room. The night unfolded in its usual way, small talk, handshakes, and the clinking of glasses. But for Liam, it was different this time. He wasn't focused on business deals or making the right impression. His attention was entirely on Sarah. The way she laughed, the way she talked with ease, the way she made everyone feel comfortable around her. It wasn't long before they found a quiet corner away from the crowd, and for a brief moment, Liam felt like they were the only two people in the room. Sarah looked at him with a soft smile. "You know," she said quietly, "I wasn't sure what to expect tonight, but I'm really glad I came." Liam smiled, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm glad you came too," he said softly. "You make everything feel different. Like, it matters more." Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth. "It does matter, Liam. More than you realize." As the evening went on, they shared more moments like this, stealing glances, exchanging soft words, and enjoying the quiet connection they had. For Liam, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a man who had found something real, something worth holding on to. By the end of the evening, after saying their goodbyes and stepping into the cool night air, Liam turned to Sarah and took her hand. "Thank you for being here with me tonight," he said, his voice sincere. "I'm not sure I would have made it through the night without you." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "You're never alone, Liam," she said softly. "Not anymore." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the gala fading into the background, and Liam realized that this was the beginning of something new. It wasn't just about the charity event, or the business deals, or even the wealth he had built. It was about the people who mattered, the people who made him feel something more than just the sum of his achievements. As they drove home that night, Liam's heart was full in a way it had never been before. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he was ready to face it with Sarah by his side. When they arrived at his house, Sarah turned to him, her eyes soft. "I know this might sound strange," she began, "but I feel like I've known you forever. Like we've been on this path together for a long time." Liam looked at her, his heart racing. "I feel the same way," he said quietly. "I don't know where this is going, but I don't want to let it go." Sarah smiled, her hand resting gently on his. "Neither do I," she whispered. "Neither do I." And in that moment, Liam knew that his life was changing in ways he hadn't expected. He had found something worth fighting for, something that went beyond his success or his wealth. He had found love, and he was ready to embrace it, with Sarah by his side. As the days turned into weeks, Liam and Sarah's bond grew even deeper. It wasn't just about spending time together anymore. It was about the way they supported each other, the way they made each other feel understood, and the quiet moments they shared. Liam had always been someone who relied on himself, someone who built his empire alone. But with Sarah, everything felt different. He no longer felt like he had to do everything on his own. She had become a part of his world, and he was slowly letting her into all the parts of his life that he had kept hidden for so long. Their connection went beyond the surface. It wasn't about the wealth, the success, or even the responsibilities that came with being a CEO and a single dad. It was about the little things, the way Sarah made him laugh, the way she listened to him without judgment, and the way she made Ella feel safe and loved. Liam had always thought that the key to happiness was success. But now, as he looked at Sarah, he realized that happiness wasn't just about what you achieved. It was about the people you allowed into your life and the connections you made along the way. One evening, as they were sitting in the living room, Ella playing with her toys nearby, Liam turned to Sarah. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice serious. "I've spent so much of my life focused on building this company, on making sure everything was perfect. But now, I'm realizing that maybe I've been missing something important all along." Sarah looked at him, her expression gentle. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft. Liam paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I've been so focused on making sure Ella has everything she needs that I forgot to focus on what really matters. It's not just about the money, or the house, or the business. It's about us as a family. And I want to build something more than just a successful career. I want to build a life with you, Sarah. A life that's not just about what we have, but about what we share." Sarah's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had always known that Liam was a good father, but hearing him say this, hearing him acknowledge the importance of their connection, made her feel something deep inside. She had never expected to fall for him the way she had, but now, it was impossible to ignore. She smiled softly, her eyes filled with warmth. "I want that too, Liam," she said quietly. "I've never been part of something like this before. But with you and Ella, I feel like I finally belong. Like I found my place." Liam's heart swelled at her words. He had never felt more at peace, more sure of what he wanted, than in that moment. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, his voice full of emotion. "But I know I want to face it with you by my side." Sarah reached out and took his hand, her touch gentle and reassuring. "I feel the same way," she whispered. They sat there for a while, the weight of their words settling between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like they were finally on the same page, ready to take the next step together. The next morning, Liam woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't had in years. He knew what he needed to do. He had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions, but now, he realized that the most important thing was his family and the love he had found with Sarah. That afternoon, he called his lawyer and asked him to prepare the necessary documents. He had something important he needed to do. Later that evening, as Sarah and Ella were sitting in the living room, Liam walked in, holding a small box in his hand. Sarah looked up, her eyes curious. "What's that?" she asked, her voice light. Liam smiled, his heart beating faster. "Sarah," he began, kneeling down in front of her, "I want to make this official. I want to build a future with you and Ella, and I want to do it the right way. Will you marry me?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him, a mix of surprise and joy crossing her face. She had never expected this, never expected that their connection would lead to this moment, but here they were. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Liam slipped the ring onto her finger, and in that moment, everything changed. It wasn't just about their love. It was about building a family, a life together, and creating something that would last. As they stood up and embraced, Ella ran over to them, her face lit up with excitement. "Are you getting married?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yes, sweetie," Liam said, holding her close. "We're going to be a family." And with that, everything fell into place. For the first time in a long time, Liam felt like he had everything he needed. He had love, he had a family, and most importantly, he had found a sense of peace that he had been searching for all his life. Months passed, and Liam, Sarah, and Ella settled into their new life together, each day bringing them closer and more intertwined. Liam had never thought that a simple act of kindness could lead to this, finding love, building a family, and finally feeling a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. The journey had not been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in his life, Liam felt like he was on the right path. He had been a successful CEO, a driven man who had always focused on achieving more, but now he found himself equally focused on his family, his daughter, and Sarah. The business world, which once consumed him, no longer felt like the only thing that mattered. It was his family, the people who loved him, and the love he had found with Sarah that gave his life true meaning. One evening, after a busy day at work, Liam sat down at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him. Sarah and Ella were in the living room, laughing as they played a game. The sound of their joy filled the house, and for the first time, Liam felt a deep sense of contentment. He didn't need to chase after more success. He already had everything he needed right here. Sarah came into the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She smiled at him, her eyes soft. "How was your day?" she asked, leaning against the counter. Liam looked up at her, a smile spreading across his face. "It was good," he said. "Busy but good. I'm just glad to be home now." He paused for a moment, his heart swelling with emotion. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, Sarah. About how far we've come and how much I've changed since we met. I never imagined I'd find someone like you." Sarah's expression softened, and she walked over to him, placing her hand gently on his. "You've always been capable of love, Liam," she said quietly. "You just needed to let yourself believe in it again." Liam nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He had never expected to find love again, especially not after everything he had been through. But Sarah had opened his heart in a way he hadn't thought was possible. "You and Ella," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've changed my life. You've given me something I didn't even know I needed. I never realized how lonely I was until you came into my life." Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with tenderness. "I think we've both been searching for something, Liam. And now we've found it." As they stood there in the quiet kitchen, Liam realized that he had never felt more complete. He had everything he had ever wanted: love, family, and the sense of peace that had always seemed out of reach. But there was still something more he wanted to give. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady, "I want to build a future with you. I want us to be a team, to face everything together, no matter what comes our way. I'm ready for this, for us." Sarah looked at him, her smile widening. "I've always known you were ready, Liam," she said. "We're already building that future, one step at a time." That evening, as they sat together with Ella, the three of them sharing a meal, Liam realized that this was his new reality. It wasn't about the big moments, the grand gestures. It was about the small, everyday moments that made life beautiful: the laughter, the love, and the connection that they shared. Their little family was growing, not just in size, but in strength, and Liam couldn't help but feel proud of what they had created together. As he looked at Sarah, his heart full, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The challenges, the triumphs, and everything in between, they would navigate it all, hand in hand, as a family. And for the first time in his life, Liam didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had already found everything he had been searching for. As the months passed, Liam, Sarah, and Ella settled into a beautiful rhythm, each day deepening the connection they had built. Liam had always been a man who prided himself on being in control, on making decisions, and steering his own path. But now, as he looked around at the life they had created together, he realized that true strength came not from control, but from love, trust, and the willingness to be vulnerable. The days weren't perfect, of course. They still faced challenges, both big and small. But they faced them together, as a family. They laughed more, they shared more, and most importantly, they loved more. It was a simple, yet profound shift that had changed everything. Liam no longer saw his life through the lens of what he had achieved or what he could control. He saw it through the eyes of his daughter, his partner, and the people who mattered most to him. One weekend, as they were all sitting in the park, watching Ella run around and play, Sarah turned to Liam with a smile. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she asked, her voice full of warmth. Liam smiled back, his heart swelling with affection. "No, I can't," he replied softly. "But I'm so glad we've come this far." They watched Ella chase after a butterfly, laughing as she tumbled into the grass. In that moment, it was clear to Liam that everything had changed, and in the best way possible. He had a family now, not just in name, but in spirit. As he looked at Sarah, he realized how much he had come to rely on her, not just for support, but for the simple joy of her presence. It wasn't just about what she brought to his life as a partner or as a mother to Ella. It was about the way she made him feel, like he mattered, like he was enough, just as he was. One evening, after Ella had gone to bed, Liam and Sarah sat together on the couch, the room bathed in the soft glow of the lamp. They were talking, as they often did, about the future, about their dreams, their hopes, and the things they wanted to do. "You know," Liam began, his voice soft but steady, "I've always had big dreams, big goals. But now, I realize that my dream is simple. It's just about us. About this family we've built. Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with love. I think that's the best dream of all, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Liam took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. I want to make sure we never lose sight of this, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. This is what matters most to me. You, Ella, our family. Sarah smiled, her heart full. I'll never let that happen, she whispered. In that moment, Liam knew that no matter what life threw their way, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they could navigate it with strength, love, and unwavering support. And as they sat there, their hands entwined, he realized that this was the greatest gift of all, the gift of family. A few months later, on a warm summer evening, Liam, Sarah, and Ella stood together in front of a small group of friends and family, celebrating their love, their commitment, and their new life together. It wasn't a grand ceremony, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Liam smiled at Sarah, his heart overflowing with gratitude and love. I'm so grateful for you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For everything you've brought into my life. Sarah smiled back, her eyes full of love. I'm grateful for you too, she replied softly. For letting me into your life, for trusting me. As they exchanged vows, surrounded by the people they loved, Liam realized that this was the moment that truly marked the beginning of their journey together. It wasn't just about the wedding or the promises they made that day. It was about the life they had built, the love they had found, and the family they had become. And as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, surrounded by their daughter and friends, Liam knew that he had finally found everything he had been searching for. Not in wealth, not in success, but in love. True love. The kind that filled his heart with joy, and the kind that made him believe in the beauty of new beginnings. From that moment on, Liam knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, hand in hand, ready to embrace the challenges and the blessings that came their way. It was the start of a new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future they would create together.